The Jeep WJ Grand Cherokee is one of the easiest cars in the Smyth lineup to build, and part of it is because it's so easy to cut. So let's zoom in. In order to remove the greenhouse, or the top of the car in the rear, you're going to cut 7 inches behind the back edge of the front door. Now remember, and this is important, 7 inches is to the cut. On this prototype car, I actually cut the headliner. Do not cut the headliner. You want 3 inches of extra headliner sticking out to here, and that's so that the headliner has enough material to butt up against the rear window surround. So 7 inches even from this corner to the back. As we go down in front, you'll see the stout cross member. We keep all the bracing and the frame rails inside of the front area of this rear wheelhouse. You're going to want this smooth. So this surface right here is where the wires mount. So we're going to reinstall these wires, but we're not going to use the little ridges and pieces that were inside. You want a smooth surface here on the inside flange. This is where the aluminum is going to mount. Moving up, you can see this definitely pressed hole that's in the stock WJ. You're going to cut about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch above that. Going to the outside, you can see a doubling, there's a doubler layer on the inside that stops right here. So I basically start cutting at the end of this doubler. I like all this reinforcement here. We're going to bond the body to this section of the body, of the outer skin. So let's keep that. And then right beyond it, I come straight down, and I'm only 1.5 inches above. I use this for bonding on the body, but when I cut, I just go a couple of inches, 1.5 inches above this. I leave 1 inch to the rear, all the way back to just above the bumper cover. The bumper cover uses these 2 rectangular pieces to slide in, and it uses these 2 bolts to mount the inner structure of the rear bumper, and we use all that. So we're going to keep this for bonding. The body is going to bond onto there. You have a choice. If your car is not rusted, like this one, you can use the stock steel piece underneath. Your bumper can mount right up to it, and you can cut your body right at this edge right here. So your body can bond on, and this edge will be it. In the mold, you'll see these 2 pieces about 2 inches down on your part. So if this is all rusted away and you have a really bad rust situation on your WJ, you can use the fiberglass piece that we provide to mount the rear bumper. The cut on the inside, here's your seatbelt mount. You'll see the outline of the double steel. You can cut along that line if you wish, but since it's curved, I just flatten out the metal with a hammer and dolly so that I have a nice smooth surface on the inside. The hole here is in the aluminum piece, so you can help position your piece when you put it in here. We follow these little bumps on the aluminum piece that we CNC cut, but you're going to want to use this flat surface to bolt the aluminum bed sides to the car. So we're obviously going to use this as a bolt that we connect the rear aluminum to, and then we're going to just use those 8mm bolts to mount it all the way down. I do not follow a lot of this. I'll hammer and dolly to get it smooth here. Toward the rear, there's a bunch of the seam sealer in the back. I just cut it a 1/2 inch above that, or not cut it, but leave that 1/2 inch above it. You can see back here is where it gets a little messy. So let's talk about the rear. As you can see, the front is pretty straightforward. You're going to follow basically that body line right there at the top, where this right here is where you begin your cutting. And you're just going to bring it on along, following the seam. Leave yourself a couple of inches, 1.5 inches of seam there. Flatten out the ridges. And then when you get to the back, you're going to see the seam sealer. I don't remove that. I literally bang this in a little bit. I tap from this direction. And I just get it a little tighter. Or, I'm sorry, I tap from this direction to move that away if it's in the way of the aluminum. You can scrape it off if you want. That's what it looks like when you scrape it off. There is a seam there that can rust. So I figured I'd leave that on there. Maybe chip it off and put another, layer of seam sealer with a brush. We'll have to see. In the back, it's a little weird. You've got the rear where the tailgate is. We want this flush. So I take a Sawzall and I literally cut sideways and then use a grinder. You can have a little bit of a bump here, You can see this one is not very rusty. This is all foam that's inside here. So for the sake of showing you what's underneath all that goop, all this stuff, I carved mine away so you can see it. I need this right here. We're flush. So the saw is coming in flush with this deck and it's slicing all of this away. We keep this corner. There's a few pictures in the manual where you're cutting just about even with this little detail line. See the square piece there? That was in the car. You'll see that on your car. I can take the piece and hold it on here and show you where that is. But basically, you're cutting this flush. The whole floor is going to be flush. And so you can see where mine's sticking up a little bit. I'll grind that down a little, I think, when I go to install this again. And I keep all this side structure to hold your rear bumper cover. So that's really the hardest part of it. This is the area that's replicated on the other side, exact same. It's a symmetrical car. We're going to use, I marked off where the inner fenders are going to go. We have spacers on the bed that raises the bed about 3/8 of an inch off of this bare surface. So you don't have to worry really about all of this, all this goop that's on here. We go just to the top surface of that goop. And use these kind of reference points. On this particular car, I've cut away this whole area. When we go to set the rear bumper in place, we have a straight edge now. So we have to remove all of this metal in the middle. You can rivet it together if you want again, to reinforce it. A lot of these pieces are 2 layers that you can put together. You can pinch that with a rivet if you like. There's some in the kit. But I'm going to trim mine. The black line is where the aluminum ends. I'm going to trim mine about right here. You guys can, trim wherever you want. This is the end of the rear. You can see the inner bumper bolts and the braces are to the outside right here. So this is the heavy frame rails that go all the way to the rear. And just like over here, this is the frame rail inside. I just cut to the inside of that frame rail, which is just as this curve. So this curve is where the frame rail is. If you're at the base of this curve right here, you're beyond the frame rail. And this is sheet metal. There's a little bit of a doubler here that you don't want to worry about. You're just slicing along this rail. Keep this rail right here. And then that's it. I had to bang mine down a little. The aluminum plate that I give you in a later video, you'll see how that sets down. It lines up with this black line. So we have a 90-degree bend that comes out to cover the top of the bumper, and it goes all the way across. That will not go to the edge of this little mount from the WJ. You want your aluminum piece to be that close, so about 1/4 of an inch away from that 1-inch little spacer. And remember, the floor is going to go on top of that. So when you put your rear tray on here, keep that in there. Don't remove that. Same thing here. You're going to be 1/4 of an inch away. This black line is the aluminum piece that you're going to mount on here. So that's the edge. So you can definitely trim away another inch here and kind of follow, this edge if you want. I leave some flat, right? So if you do trim, you can go like this, give yourself a little bit of flat, and then you can rivet your aluminum to that surface. And then that's going to mount down here. So I had to tap this down on mine. You can see I just took a little ball peen hammer and made sure that this thin sheet metal, this stuff moves. I want to rivet this edge here to the aluminum plate that I mount to the bumper. And I might actually pull that up a little bit to match the aluminum surface, but that's really it. And in the middle I notched this out. I just didn't want to deal with it. I'm going to fill this with foam and then prime it. But this gives you an idea of spare tire access. Your aluminum plate covers this all the way and then comes back and down and out. So all this is covered. I guess theoretically, if you looked in this way from inside the spare tire wall, you could see some of this. But I'm just goobering it up and then priming it, with bed liner. And same thing. This is usually a really rusty part. You want to cut this. This is the surface that the aluminum mounts to, just like this is. So this is the mirror image. Here's your seatbelt bolt. Why not keep it and use it as a mount, right? So the aluminum wall that we provide goes all along here. Technically, this area here is not used to bond, to the aluminum. This area here is. You can reach under there and see the aluminum is cut out to fit this area. You're going to toss the cover that you had on the Jeep. You're going to get rid of that. This side is very rusty on this car. But you can see when you pull off the skin of the quarter panel, and remember there's some pictures in the manual, but there's a foam layer here that if you heat it up with a heat gun, it basically comes right off. Well, you have to watch. There's 2 spot welds. There's one right here, and there's one down here. You have to drill out, with a 3/8 inch drill. I started with a 3/16 drill and then just did a 3/8. Pop that one out, drill it out, pop this one out, and then there's a tab right here. And that tab right there is also spot welded. I didn't drill this out. You could, if you wanted to. You can drill that out right in the middle. I just snipped it with the with the Sawzall from underneath, and it came right off. But this is foam from when we made the molds, so yours will be a lot cleaner than this. But then the outer skin comes off, and you're exact same cut as the other side. You're coming along, you have the doubler area. Remember, this one has Bondo on it because we made the mold off of this car. Here's your surface here. Remember, you don't have to do it exactly as I do it. I use, look, a couple of inches above this deck, something just above this. If you were to draw a line here, this plus about 1 inch would be fine. And that's really it. I wish I could tell you there was more sometimes, because this one is a very simple car to cut. I mean, these things are Sawzall blades flush. That's easy. There's nothing in the middle to cut at all. All of this stuff unbolts. A little bit of water protection when we go to that stage of the videos, you'll see here, but there's no cutting up here. Just on the roof and just on the quarter panel. So there you are. You can see, here's a great example. This side is under the fuel area. This particular car, look how rusty this was. This all fell away. I mean, this is ridiculous, right? This is how we mount the rear fender. So on this particular car, I'll use on this side the fiberglass to mount the fender. I'm going to cut this off. And then I'm going to bond the fender like we normally do at the top. And instead of down here on the bottom, I'm going to get rid of all this, cut it all off, and I'll just have one little bracket that will mount the stock fiberglass to something under here. I mean, this was a disaster. You can see, check this area when you buy your cars. I have enough here. Technically, I could use this and then use these two, but I think I'll just reinforce this, give that a try. If I don't like it, I'm just going to trim this whole thing right under the mount here and use the fiberglass for the other mounts. So even if this is all gone, you can still use the fiberglass that we provide, bond it to here, reinforce your gas cap area, and literally have no problem at all. Remember, you have a 1/8 inch wall on the inside for structure. We don't care about this outer skin. So if you have a rusty car, don't be sad about it. You can just get rid of that stuff and we can salvage the car. Definitely check your frame rails, but this area is notorious for water, so check that on the used cars. And that's it. I'll do one more pass so you can see where I cut things. And remember, you could cut it all the way out to the black line. That was my original plan. And just rivet the aluminum or bond. I might just grind this down. I'll paint this with panel bond, and I think I'll set my aluminum piece down on top of that with just bonding. I don't want to see those rivets. Even under the cover, I don't want to see all this mess. So I think I'll just bond my aluminum down on the back edge here with panel bond, a little bead, and then I'll bolt it to here, with the flush rivets. A lot of different ways you can do it, but that gives you an idea of how to cut your Jeep Grand Cherokee. And then the inside. Like I said, the only difficult spot, if there is a difficult spot, is this corner. And this is what you keep. You can get rid, even if you want to, you can get rid of some of this stuff. You can angle this off like this. We're not using any of it. We have a new fiberglass quarter panel that replaces all of that. But this is the line. Don't dare go beyond that line. You're going to want to use this surface. You're going to want to bolt and rivet to this surface here, at least 1 inch or so. Keep. That is not a cut line. That's the end of the aluminum for reference. So don't cut on this line. Leave this flange in place. I guess I'll reinforce that one more time. This line right here below it, this is not a cut line. So that's it. One more reminder. Up top, 7 inches from the rear. And that's it. There's your Jeep Grand Cherokee cut. Have fun cutting.